who is still hiring, who is still laying off?
Yeah. At a high level, we have big box retailers, logistic companies, and really anything having to do with grocery store, delivery, produce, secondary and tertiary supply chain around that are still hiring. On what's happening in the market and what we're starting to see as states are starting to ease and open up, we're actually seeing some really interesting dynamics and concerning dynamics start to become available. One is because of the positive measures the government has put in place around unemployment, we're seeing that the frontline COVID-related industries, such as restaurants, retail stores, are having a lot of trouble hiring people to come back into the work area, mostly because unemployment right now is paying them the same or more than what they would be making by going back to work and putting their lives potentially at risk. So that's the
Does that imply higher wages then, Irina?
Mm-hmm. It could, but there's depending on right now, on average, depending on the state and your past unemployment history, between state and federal unemployment, you're making about $25 an hour, where the frontline workers typically were making anywhere between 10 to 20. So it's a pretty big wage differential that would need to get made up. What's actually happening is different demos are stepping in. So, for example, teenagers, kids that are coming right out of college that are looking really to get anything on their resume. And we're seeing a big pop in the demo above 65, which is concerning on many different levels, given they're the most at risk on COVID. But we're seeing the biggest growth in candidates around 65 and higher taking those jobs.
Wow, that is really fascinating. Does that continue? Like, at what point do you think that reverses and we go back to old school?
It really goes back to the comment that you entered the section with, is that once we have a little bit more visibility into what's happening with the COVID vaccine and people feel more comfortable in coming in, then that will ease. I also think it's going to be a really big musical chair situation, in that once things start opening up, you don't want to lose your job. And so people are going to be jumping back, but everybody's waiting for that inflection point and trying to time it perfectly, which is a hard thing to do.
At the same time, something that we learned on Friday's jobs report, if you take a look at the average hourly earnings, was the disproportionate pain for lower income workers versus white collar jobs. How long does it seem white collar jobs can stay strong in this environment?
There's definitely an advantage to those jobs that have an ability to work from home. You mentioned on the wage differential, we're seeing it on an unemployment rate in a material way as well. When you look at just white men, unemployment rate is about 13% versus Hispanic unemployment rate is almost 20%, which is a material difference. And even though as an economy in April alone, we gave back all the job growth that we got in the decade, we're actually seeing the advancement we've made for women and minorities on the wage differential and just in general diversity metrics that we've moved forward on really pulled back, because we were over-indexed to minorities and women in a lot of these front-facing COVID-affected industries.
Yeah, it was really staggering when we saw that number come out too. So do we see, though, any cracks in the white-collar job market so far, or no?
We haven't yet. We have seen some positive. When you look at the U.S. in aggregate, we're down about 35% in overall job postings, versus compared to some of the countries like France that's at 70%, or UK that's at 60%, or New Zealand even that everyone has been talking about at 55%. Last week has been our smallest decline that we've seen since COVID started, at about 1.5%. So it's slowly, the stabilization, we haven't seen the cracks on white collar, but we're slowly starting to see some stabilization on the blue collar. Obviously, we're watching this week to week, but it's the first positive momentum that we've seen, with some states actually be hitting positive for the first week, including California, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Colorado, Kentucky. Obviously, those states still have a lot more to go to get into the fully positive, but it's progress.
progress, and we did see some of that reflected in the jobs report when those on temporary layoffs was up to 18 million. Like, that was responsible primarily for the huge increase that we saw in lost jobs. Have you seen any cracks on the temporary layoff crew? Because I'm assuming if you're a business and like a restaurant, you reopen, you bring back 3 of your workers, and then you say, hey, I actually only need 1 worker now. Is that going to be a shift where the on temporary layoff now go to not on temporary layoff?
We're watching that. It's slowly starting again because some of these states only eased their restrictions in the past 5 days. So this jobless claims number is still going to be a little backwards looking. It won't contain that. And we don't really have a great furlough metric, but we're watching as some of these frontline COVID affected industries are bringing people back, how that moves. But it's still a little early to tell.